Okay, so in today's little discussion, what I want to do is talk about different functional applications to give you a background. Particularly, this is going to be focusing on a lot of the jobs, since most of you are business students, um, of the different majors that you're going into. So a lot of these terminology you should be familiar with, particularly when we get to your specific area. But what I want to do is show you just how integrated one these applications are to what you're going to be doing. Not only because of the fact you're going to be using these different applications, but also for you to consider things like dual majoring in whatever major you're currently in information systems. In part because, honestly, that will really give you a fundamental differentiating point from other people graduating. Information systems are so integrated, as I made clear earlier, so integrated with how businesses are work today, that having this background not only of what is an information system, but knowing how to optimize various business processes with information systems is an incredibly powerful set of skills for you to have. All right. So, what am I going to talk about today? So, number one, what is the difference between a functional information system and a functional application? And we talked about the difference between an information system and information technology and so on before. So I want to hammer in on that point. Number two, what are the functions of sales and marketing applications? So those of you in the marketing department or getting your marketing degree. What are the functions of the operations applications? This is more supply chain oriented. What are the functions of the manufacturing applications? This is more operations management. Number five, what are the functions of the human resources applications? So those of you going into management. And then what are the functions of the accounting applications, which also includes a lot of finance as well. That's going to be covered in chapter 6, or not chapter 6, and question 6. So let me get that right. All right. So first off, let's make sure we define our terms right. So what is the difference between a functional information system and a functional application? So a functional information system, you think of it as a single organizational function. How does information move through the department or a work group? So how does the information move through a specific department or work group? That movement, that process is the functional information system. Oftentimes that is supported by some computer program or component within the functional information system, and that is what a functional application is. So today what we're going to be talking about is the functional applications, and specific applications that support functional information systems. Functional information systems support the business process that support the value creation of the business to actually create a valuable company. All right, so how do we go about creating functional information systems? Well, number one, and you have to keep in mind that a lot of functional information systems, a lot of times they do exist in some form or fashion. When we talk about, especially unless you're creating a business from scratch, in which case you have nothing, right? But if you already have a business, creating a functional information system, you have to start by understanding what are the requirements of the function. Okay, and this can change over time. So just because it's not like you do it once and you're done forever. This is something that can change every few years. You might need to come back and revisit this. You also need to evaluate the functional applications. So this is assuming that there are some that exist, and oftentimes there are, and as we'll break down in each of the areas here in a second. Oftentimes there are applications already developed by other companies that you can purchase. What you want to do though is compare what are you currently doing and needing, that's your requirements. You're going to compare that with what exists that someone else has already built. So that is your evaluate functional applications and select closest fit. If you cannot find that, you might have to build your own. And so that's where software development within a business takes place, is once you realize that. Now you may also have to do some sort of what's called integration. So we talked about a little bit about that in Chapter 7 about integrating across different functionalities. It still might be a part of this, and that's part of what you hire IT people to do. All right, but once you've done your evaluation, then you actually go about implementing the application in context of supported functional processes. Okay, now this might require you to alter the process or the software. You have a choice. Not all software can be altered, but many of it can be. Many applications can be altered, particularly if there's some. So, and this is example what I did when I worked in industry. I actually worked with a company developing a project management software, but we would then go to many businesses and say, listen, here is our software. We will customize our software based upon your needs. And so they would then pay us a little bit of extra money, essentially consulting to alter our base code for what they needed. So that was a case where we didn't alter their process, we altered the software to fit their process. Now, we also had a kind of a core of how our software was supposed to work, and if they didn't quite fit with our software, oftentimes they would go with someone else. All right. After you've altered the process or the software, you build remaining components of an information system. So what does that mean? Well, because the application, it may do, let's say, 90% of what you need. And so you might just buy that software, install the software, but it doesn't do that last 10%. Well, what are you going to do about that last 10%? Well, that's where you build remaining components to finish out the information system. Now this might be something like, suppose you're in the publishing a website and you're putting news up on your website, but your software, so you could buy something that's called a content management system that allows you to create your articles right on a kind of a back end or an administrative part of the website. You can have your writers doing it, writing on that part, but that piece of software may not be really good at managing the process of editorial review and such, or it may not be a very good piece of software for writing things from scratch, in which case you might use something like Microsoft Word. And then maybe there's a way you can click a button, or maybe make a little add-on in Microsoft Word where you click a button and it will automatically transfer all that text to your content management system. Now, if you don't understand all the terms that I'm using, like content management system, don't worry about it. The point being, though, just because you have one big chunk of the software doesn't mean it fits and solves everything. Another example, so that software program I told you I was working on a few years back, I used to work at this company doing project management software. We had to develop a component for our software when we went to one of our clients that would integrate our software with Microsoft Project software. So Microsoft develops a piece of software called Project. So we wanted an integration there, so we had to build an extra component to do that. So that's essentially what they're talking about here. So you want to fill in the gaps, and then whichever best way that you can. And maybe you can't. Maybe you just keep it as a simple paper and pencil process. But the point being, though, is once you know the requirements, you find software that does the best job you can, and then you implement that. Find out if you got to change any of your processes or your software, build any remaining components, and then you can finally finish by acquiring and install the hardware, populate the database, adapt to standard procedures, and train your staff. And surprisingly, people, that last little thing there, train their staff, is something they'll put 99% of their effort all into the other parts and forget to train their staff. And so when the staff get the software, they can't do it. And so it can create big problems. So that should not be something that's ignored. In fact, now some businesses do this really well. I was talking to a former student who said she worked at, I believe it was Home Depot, and she said, like, once a week, she would go on their computer system. They had some computers in the back office, but it'd be basically training materials. And so she would walk through a training module once a week. And so that was part of their training for their staff. And one of them might be how to do returns, and another one might be how to ring people out at a register, or one might be how to use the self-checkout lanes or support people in their self-checkout lanes, and so on. So it would continually teach them new processes and procedures for the software. They didn't do it all at once, which you can, or you can just incrementally do it over time. All right, so that's the basic process. And as you'll see in there, as professionals going out there, the big parts where you're going to fit into this is, one is determine requirements of the function. So you really need to understand what is the functional process that you're doing. So it's not just a matter of kind of halfway guessing. You need to be precise about determining what exactly you need. You're going to have to know how to learn how to use this software when you're out there. So let's dig into what particular software are you most likely to see when you go out into the business world. All right. So number one, we're going to start with the functions of sales and marketing applications. You might sometimes find that there's one piece of software that does all of these, or you might have all of these as separate pieces of software. It just really depends a lot on how the business developed over time. But one of them can be at the very beginning of the customer retention process is the prospect or lead generation. This is essentially you're trying to get names of people. And you want to try to compile this in some way. So this might be mailings that you put out in the mail and send out, or emails you send out to blast out to people. So you've got an email list or a website. Once you do that, you want to track those people that are interested, which is called lead tracking. And this is where you can record your leads. So, and it might be someone who emails you back, or somebody that's been to your website and filled out a little form to learn more. Okay, so they're interested enough to start a conversation. And so what you want to do is try to continue to monitor that conversation and hopefully convince them that you can help them solve their problems with your product or service that you're offering. So then you can record who they are, what products they're interested in, your history of contacts with them. So especially if you're following a sequence of activities that you want to do to try to convince them to buy, you want to know which activity you've actually done with them. Hopefully, if you do that well, you can convert those leads into customers. Now, so customer management is the next one. Maintain customer contact and order history. Maintain and report credit status. Track products interests. Okay, so you can have an entire application that just deals with those customers. Fourth, you could have something for sales forecasting. So this might be keeping a record of all the individual sales and projections into the future. And so this is kind of a looking at not just what has happened in the past, but where do you think things are going. It might be industry trends you're looking at, or your own business trends on various different products. So maybe one of your products has been doing really well, but in the last 6 months, the sales percentage growth has slowed from double digits down to like 5% growth a month. Is that a sign that you've fully penetrated the marketplace, and should you start looking at another product that might replace this one? So there's a lot of different. So that's just thinking about where are sales coming from, and it kind of ties in with the next one, product and brand management. Including manage the product life cycle, and that can tie into the sales forecasting, but isn't necessarily the same thing. But the product and brand management gets into where the sales results from order processing or receivable applications, and you want to compare results to projections. You want to assess promotions and advertising and sales channels. You want to know, if I put out a sale for 10% off, did that really help drive more sales? So just because we offer, did people actually come in and buy more, enough to offset the 10% sale coupon? Well, that's an important question to ask. Did it actually work? Or you can assess product success in various different market segments. So across the sales and marketing, there's these 5 tend to be very common applications, and you might find other things as well. For example, I've used a number of prospect or lead generation software, including I have an email list, I have a website, but I really don't do much of the other things like lead tracking, customer management, sales forecasting, or product and brand management. At least not yet, and maybe that's something I need to, or I thought a little bit about product life cycle for developing some products, but I really haven't pushed that real hard. So that is certainly, if I were to develop my own business, that's something I would want to consider, is am I just going to use an Excel file? Am I going to use a Access database? Am I going to have something a little more sophisticated? And we'll talk more about some of those in the future. But if you're starting out as an individual just running a business, a lot of times Excel tends to be very popular. Or as you guys have learned now, you can use Access and do a lot of this integrated together. But that's if you're developing it yourself. Now, there's also a lot of applications already out there that do this for you. All right, so what about operations? And what is operations? When I say the operations application, what they're talking about is the finished goods. So this is assuming after manufacturing's already done, right? And you want to move those goods to customers. So this is part of your value chain, right? The primary value chains, the operations, and used by non-manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers, retailers that often have a lot of finished goods in their inventory, and they need to send them on their way. So principal operations include, finished goods, inventory management, order entry, order management, and customer service. So let's look at those 4 main operations applications. So order entry is basically whenever someone makes an order with you, you want to try to capture, one, the customer data. You want to know what is their credit. You want to know their record of pay, or record their payment method. So can they pay in the future? What are they going to pay by? And entry of the order for processing. Right? So you need all that customer information there, where's the money coming from, and then what are they actually ordering. Order management deals with, once the order has been entered, how do we make sure it gets sent out? So this is, track order fulfillment. That's called fulfillment centers. It's called fulfillment. You can have things like fulfillment centers, which usually use an order management application, but includes things like schedule shipping or handle exceptions or inform customers of order status. And it could even include things like returns. How do you handle returns? And that might be part of your order management. You often need some sort of inventory management. So how much inventory do you have? How much inventory do you expect to need? So dealing with that and support and evaluate policy. And lastly, customer service. So assuming customers, they're going to have questions about the order, or maybe they have changes to their order. So when they call or try to contact you, you need some sort of system to deal with the customer, so you can keep track of when they have contacted you and update the other systems appropriately. Right? And this can be done both by phone or through a web interface. All right. What are the functions of manufacturing applications? So manufacturing as you might imagine, deals with a lot of with the creation of the goods. So we're not have the finished goods yet. We're taking raw materials and making them into finished goods. Well, you have to know what raw materials you have. You need to know. You need to plan out what you're manufacturing. So there's going to be some planning involved with that. Scheduling when you're running. So maybe if you have a factory, oftentimes you can create multiple different things at different times. So you got to think about the planning of what you need, scheduling that when the certain runs are going to happen, and then various different operations. So what does that look like? So planning gets into like create and maintain a bill of materials and create and maintain manufacturing requirements for equipment, personnel, and facilities. So like it's the part that says, all right, so in order to create this product, we need these sets of materials at these specific times to show up at this specific place. But you can also get into systems that or applications, and this part of manufacturing planning gets into what requirements for the equipment and personnel and facilities. So we have to maintain this equipment somehow. That is part of your manufacturing planning to make sure that maintenance is done correctly. Manufacturing scheduling gets into creating a master production plan. Right? You sometimes need to integrate manufacturing signals into production schedule. You need to be able to produce material requirement plans and schedules. Right? And you need to produce equipment, personnel, and facility plans and schedules. So there's all different types of manufacturing scheduling that needs to get done. Those also require specific applications. And then you have manufacturing operations, where you schedule and control machines in accordance to the production schedules. Right? And these tend to be far more specific for the type of manufacturing that's getting done. So you might have like robots, or you might have conveyor belts. Those need to be controlled. How are they going to be controlled? They're going to be controlled by the manufacturing operations. So there's an application that allows you to control the speed of the conveyor belt and the speed of the robotics that are working on the line. And so maybe you're changing the product that's being developed on this particular line in the factory. You need to change the operations, right? And so yeah, there's a variety of different applications that also occur here in the manufacturing area. What about human resources? Well, human resources deals with the human resources, obviously, duh. I mean, that's kind of stupid of me to say. The human resources of the organization. But that includes finding those resources, keeping them happy, helping them to develop, and then even assessing, do they still belong, right? So recruitment, compensation, training, and assessment. And you could probably even put in there HR planning. So even thinking going forward, what people do we need to hire in the future? Right. So starting with recruiting, this gets into things like job posting, resume processing, hiring procedures. But this can take an entire application just to make sure you stay consistent across an organization, that you don't, that when you're hiring people based upon a set standard, whatever standard that particular organization needs. You can create your own application for assessment, which gets into looking at, what are the job requirements and are they actually doing those requirements. Development and training can be, do you have specific programs for development, maybe to become managers, or to train on specific pieces of software, or train on specific skills, right? And this can include a module for maintaining what skills do individuals have. And so you can look at their current skill level, maybe what are their goals, and how we can develop them to get there. And as long as it's in alignment with how the business is growing, that's awesome, right? Oftentimes you have specific applications that deal with compensation. So, what payroll, vacation, health benefits, retirement plans, employee stock contributions, whatever. And then you have HR planning. Again, this is looking to the future. So what standards do we have, including job classifications, skill levels, pay standards, and then staff planning. So you can start thinking about who are we going to need to hire in the future. And this can also be based not just on, normal attrition rates, but also looking at growth of the company. So if you're expecting the company to grow by 10% this coming year or 20% this coming year, you're going to need a certain number of employees. You can start planning that out ahead of time to not only to fill these expectations coming up, and also can allow you to appropriately train. So if you know where you're going, you can train staff to fill these roles in the future too. So there's a lot, and that's where the integration part comes in, and we'll get to that when we get to ERP and talk more about that. But that's essentially the basic idea. So human resource applications goes far beyond just the part you probably are most familiar with, which is the recruiting side, which is if you're looking for jobs. Well, yeah. And you might even be very aware of the compensation side, that you know that there are some systems. But you also consider that there's sometimes some of these systems are designed so that employees can update them themselves. Like at ECU, that's what they have. They have a system, and they have a window when it's open where you can come in and change certain of your benefits. But if I want to go in and look at my pay history, I can go into One Stop, and all that information is available, including my vacation and health benefits and tax deductions and all that stuff is out there. All right, let's look at the last one, the accounting department. So what functions are accounting applications? Well, accounting can actually have a lot of different applications, and then some of these might be technically classified as finance, but to quick breakdown, you can do something like treasury management, which looks at your retained earnings and dividends, payments, and long-term financing. You can do cash management. So you can have an application specifically for cash management, so you can prepare the company's cash budget. You can have accounts payable. So this keeps tracks of all the money that it owes to its suppliers, and then it can schedule payments too. And particularly as a business grows. And what's interesting is I'm talking to my wife a lot recently, because where she works, they're a very small business, and they have maybe about less than 10 employees. I don't know what the exact count is right now. But one thing that they're always, she's always talking to me about is, she's struggling with the accounts payable, not in that she doesn't know what she owes the other people, but actually scheduling the payments out is actually kind of difficult at times, because they're a small company and their money flow widely varies. But on the flip side of that is also accounts receivable. So it's also important to know who owes you money and to manage the collection of that money. Now, a lot of software applications, accounting software applications, have this combined: accounts payable and accounts receivable with the general ledger, which shows your balance. So it's important to know what is your current balance in assets and liabilities and equity, and then who owes you money and who do you owe money, because that's going to impact what your bottom line is. But you also need things like financial reporting. Specifically, if you are a public company, you have to meet certain requirements for reporting your finances to investors and creditors and other external users. You can do cost accounting applications, and then budgeting applications to figure out what money you need for various projects or various departments or whatnot. All right, so this is just a quick breakdown of the different functional applications that you might witness when you go out into the business world. But I did want to emphasize how important it is for you to not only know what some of these applications might be, and to know that some of these are integrated, some of them are separate, but for you to realize that information systems is usually an integrated part within every business application or every business function that you're going to go into. So not only to know that these things exist, not only to know how to use these things, but also to know that this information is something, knowing how an information system works within your business function will make you a stronger candidate, will make you a stronger employee and a stronger manager and a stronger employer. Someday I expect some of you guys to rise all the way up to executive level, and for you to see this entire big pictures is very, very important. All right, that's it for this chapter extension, and next time we're going to look at ERP systems, which basically combine everything we just talked about.